We talk about our core value is that we're patient forward. Our goal was not merely to extend survival, but to try to find ways to really drive patients into full remission.
Welcome to Believe in Progress, the American Association for Cancer Research Foundation podcast. Join us and be inspired by the incredible stories of those who have faced cancer with strength and resilience, and the medical professionals who are working tirelessly to find new treatments and ultimately a cure. Believe in Progress isn't just about the science of cancer. It's about the human side of this disease. Together, we can make progress in the fight against cancer and bring hope to those who need it most. Welcome to the Believe in Progress podcast, brought to you by the American Association for Cancer Research. I'm your host, Mitch Stoller, Chief Philanthropic Officer at the AACR. Today, we have an exciting episode featuring two pioneering leaders from Novocure, a company revolutionizing cancer treatment through Tumor Treating Fields, also known as TTFields therapy. We are honored to have Frank Leonard, Executive Vice President and President of Novocure Oncology, and Dr. Moshe Giladi, Chief Scientific Officer at Novocure. Join us as we explore their innovative work and the impact of TTFields therapy on cancer treatment. Frank and Moshe, welcome so much. I'm so excited to have you here today and talk a lot about Novocure and learn a little bit more about each of you. But so happy to have you here today.
It's great to be here, Mitch. Thanks for having us. It's great to be in your office here in Philadelphia, which is my hometown. So it's good to see you.
Moshe?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mitch, for the invitation. And again, not with you, a couple of thousands of miles away, but very happy to be here.
Moshe joins us today from Israel, and we are delighted to have him on board here today. So Frank, I was wondering if you could chat a little bit about how Novocure became an idea and has kind of got to where it is today.
Well, thank you. Again, thank you for having me on. So the story of Novocure as a company really starts with our founder, Dr. Yoram Palti, who is an MD, PhD, researcher at the Technion Institute in Israel, which is, for Israel, it's sort of like the MIT of Israel. So it's the preeminent engineering and medical center in Israel. And Professor Palti's research had primarily been in electrophysiology, so mostly around the human heart, but really with a core specialty in how does electricity interact with the human body. And as he retired from his primary, his primary career, he left the Technion, and he began to go back to this insight that he'd had earlier in life that electric fields, and we can talk about what an electric field is more in a moment, but that electric fields are known to stimulate tissue, and they're also known to heat and ablate tissue. But electric fields that are applied at a specific range of frequency had been thought to be inert with the human body and with cells. And he sort of started from the premise of that can't be right. We can't have electricity interacting with the human body in a wide range of activities and then suddenly have it be inert within a specific set of frequencies. And he began to work through the science, and Moshe can really talk more about that, and took it to a place where he believed that you could use electric fields to kill cancer cells. This is in the sort of 2000 timeframe. And from there, he founded the company of Novocure to develop and commercialize the technology. And so we're 24 years now into the development of this novel scientific and clinical approach to treating cancer. And the analogy that I always kind of apply to Novocure is that we're 24 years into the development of this technology, and I think about it in the context of chemotherapy, where we're approaching 100 years of development, or radiation therapy that's 125 years. So we really think we're at the beginning of what should be a century of research as we refine where to apply Tumor Treating Fields and how best to help patients.
And anything behind the name Novocure? How did that come about?
Well, we've always been a company that, we talk about our core value is that we're patient forward. And I think part of that is that when we think about helping doctors treat cancer patients, you have a patient who's fighting for their life. And, we wanted to start from the premise that we would be audacious and we would really aim for doing something that's completely new, and that our goal was not merely to extend survival, but to try to find ways to really drive patients into full remission. And so the name is in some respects, it's both, it's theoretical and it's very aspirational. It's saying that we have a new approach that's driving for a cure. On the other hand, it's very practical, and that I think it's inspirational for our employees, that it reminds them that there's a patient at the end of what you do. There's a patient who's fighting for their life, and you really need to aspire in everything you do to match that determination that they have in what you apply to your work every day.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love the patient focused, and that's what we're all about at AACR, being patient focused. Putting the patient first, families, all the above. Moshe, tell me, so our audience is mixed. We do have scientists in the audience, but we have a lot of lay people, cancer survivors and their families. Talk a little bit about TTFields and explain what that is and how it works and what that's all about.
Thank you. And I think Frank already mentioned TTFields are basically electric fields. And electric fields, by definition, apply forces on charges. And this is what TTFields are doing. Now, the essence of the invention by Professor Palti is all about the tuning of the frequency, which makes it now feasible to generate electric fields inside the body, inside the tumor cells, without electrifying the patients. And once these electric fields are applied, they disrupt cellular processes, which are critical for cancer cell viability and tumor progression. And one of the very first things that we learned is that TTField lead to the disruption of cell division, the mitotic process. And this resulted either in cell dying during mitosis or to the formation of abnormal daughter cells, which present different type of stress and eventually die in a cell death, which is perceived as immunogenic. Now, the therapy, it's also important to mention it's a local regional therapy, and it uses non-invasive arrays which are placed on the skin, and the electric fields are applied using a portable medical device. And basically, as far as I know, this is the only medical device for the treatment of cancer at home, but I don't know, Mitch, maybe you know something else.
I don't think so. When you say local and regional, so it's applied in different parts of the body depending on where the cancer is?
Exactly. And in order to maximize the efficacy, we are optimizing the location of the arrays per patient in order to deliver the highest electric field intensities or dose to the tumor.
Are you all focused on some specific cancers right now? And the other, second part of that question is this also, can this be used in combination with other potential therapies?
Yes, obviously we cannot. At the moment, we are still a medium-sized company. We cannot treat all cancers. I'm very much familiar with the preclinical work that had been done throughout the years. I lost track at around 30 different cell lines and different indications. I think the number is much higher. These are preclinical tests which demonstrated TTFields efficacy, but we are still counting. We believe that the basic mechanism of action could be applicable to different tumor types. Now, the mode of delivery, which I described earlier, is loco-regional in nature, and this makes the therapy mainly applicable for solid tumors. Now, you also asked about potential other treatments which can work with TTFields, right? So, in that regard, we have a lot of effort on understanding TTField mechanism of action. For example, we learned about the anti-mitotic effect of TTFields, and there are several others outcomes downstream to the anti-mitotic effect. We see the immunogenic cell death. We also know that TTField induce inhibition of DNA damage repair. Now, these versatile outcomes of the same modality eventually rationalize the application of TTFields together with other treatments, such as antimitotic agents, immunotherapies, radiation therapy, or other DNA damaging agents. And in practice, when we apply TTField nowadays in the clinic, is mainly together with other cancer treatment, and we do it in glioblastoma, we do it in mesothelioma. We've done many clinical studies in other indications, and maybe Frank can speak more on the broader outreach.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So thank you. I think Moshe did a good job of summarizing the potential for Tumor Treating Fields from a scientific standpoint. From a clinical standpoint, where we are today is that we have approval to treat in the United States to treat patients with glioblastoma, which is a grade 4 brain tumor. I think, as everybody knows, it's just an incredibly devastating diagnosis. This is the tumor type that unfortunately befell Ted Kennedy as well as John McCain, and here in Philadelphia, Darren Dalton.
Yes.
One of my childhood heroes. And so we were approved to treat glioblastoma both at the initial indication and at the recurrence. And more recently, we've had an FDA approval under the HDE, which is a humanitarian device exemption to treat mesothelioma. So those are the two indications that we've taken all the way through the FDA process. In terms of the clinical development, though, we've completed phase 3 trials now in non-small cell lung cancer, and we have our application for approval at the FDA currently for that indication.
Mm-hmm.
And later this year, we will also have phase 3 trial results from a trial in pancreatic cancer.
That's fantastic. Are individuals that, let's say, go into a clinical trial and use this great technology, is there an initial reaction? Are they nervous about putting a device on their body and knowing that it's an electrical field, that type of thing?
It is a great question, and I think it goes to the core of our mission and why our company really always has to remain so patient focused and forward. It's that this is a device that the patient must incorporate into their life. So it's not a hospital-based intervention. It's not a drug that's infused and then you go home. You really do have a device that you carry with you. It weighs about 2 pounds, and then you have the arrays that are placed that are delivering the energy, and then also making sure that the temperature and the electrical outputs of the device are safe. So I think it's not necessarily, from my experience, patients are not apprehensive about the pure safety, but it is an actual process to decide, I want to bring this in to my treatment paradigm. I need my caregiver to support me, and how will I have a plan of incorporating this into my life? But what we do see is that once the patients do bring it into their life, it is something that they can manage. And so far in all our clinical studies, as well as in our commercial safety in over 30,000 patients, the only device-related adverse event has been skin irritation, which is you can imagine if you were wearing bandage
Yes.
or an array for weeks at a time, that's obviously a known known risk. And so that's one big consideration that I always think about is that we're not asking the patients to take on additional systemic burden from the treatment. So it's not making them nauseous. It's not making their hair fall out. But it is something that we do need to help the patient, and we provide that technical support in the patient's home to ensure that they can incorporate it into their life.
And when somebody is, was wearing the device, is using the device, is it all day long, or is it for like a specific period of time? And does that depend on that each individual?
What we know from our preclinical testing as well as our clinical results is that the more you use the device, the more the tumor responds. And so our recommendation in glioblastoma is to have the device on more than 18 hours a day, and to use it continuously, because it's energy, it's anatomically directed energy that is targeting a tumor and trying to kill the tumor cells, and so. Unlike a chemotherapy, which you put into your body, that has a half-life that is working, as the drug works through your system. When you're using our device, and when it's on, it's on. When it's off, it's off. And so we really try to recommend using it as much as possible.
Gotcha. Moshe, as the Chief Scientific Officer, what are your major responsibilities? What are your goals and aspirations for the company as the Chief Scientific Officer?
Through the research, we have a much better understanding of TTFields and mechanism of action. And by better understanding TTFields, we can improve the modality, and we can improve it in several different ways. We can improve the modality itself. So we can improve the medical device, we can improve the electric fields which are being applied, we can improve the intensities which are being delivered. So there is a lot of effort in that regard. And also, by understanding the biological outcome of this medical device, we can better identify the partners that TTFields are applied together with. And this is again based on the understanding of the mechanism of action. So I get to work with both internal teams. We have quite a large internal team, over 60 researchers, biological research, physics, engineering.
Are they spread out all over the world, or are they in Israel?
Internally, they are mainly in Israel, but we have many different collaborators worldwide. So the TTField research is now not just in Novocure. I think most of it is done outside of the company.
Great. And Frank, if he gets the fun job, tell me a little bit about your job and what your roles and responsibilities are within the company.
Well, I don't like to think about it as the unfun part. I think it's very challenging. It's very challenging to develop a company from a founder's basement to a worldwide operation. And it may not be fun every day, but it is incredibly rewarding. And so in my role as president, really what I'm responsible for is how do we take our clinical results, take them through approvals around the world, and then build the operations where we can support the patients in all of our active countries. And maybe just to take a step back for a moment, just talking about the business of how oncology companies typically develop. More often than not, if you're an oncology drug or targeted therapy or immune therapy, you would take that potentially through a phase 1 or phase 2 trial. Correct. And then be acquired. Mm-hmm. And it's really been almost, I think, 30 years since the last multinational oncology company that covered multi-indications went from startup to full global operations. And we have this unique challenge that because we are a medical device, we are not squarely on the radar of oncology companies that typically know how to develop and commercialize drugs and biologics. That we don't fit in their portfolio. And on the device side, we are unique in that we run very large randomized phase 3 trials to prove the survival benefit of the device, which is typically not something you see a medical device company doing. And so right. we just don't fit into either one of those typical buckets, which put the burden on us to actually figure out how do you go from day one with a founder and an idea and some early research to having employees in 16 countries around the world, supporting the nearly 4,000 patients who are on therapy, supporting the 30,000 patients who have been on therapy, the researchers around the world, the doctors around the world who are using the therapy. It's also the story of how you operationalize a brand new modality in treating cancer. If you think about it that way, you've got surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and biologics, and then you sort of add on this new layer of Tumor Treating Fields. You have to have the infrastructure to actually deliver it, and that's what we've been building up over the last 24 years.
What an exciting opportunity as well. And from your perspective as a professional and the president of Novocure, it's really challenging, right? But it sounds like an inspiring opportunity.
It is, and actually, I think one of the things I love about your podcast is the way that you've brought together the voices, this idea of hope and sort of how do we actually advance the care of cancer? And you've had the great voices of some of the researchers, but also the patients who talk about how they get themselves to a place of hope. And, from our side in industry, I think it's one of the greatest privileges is that if I was in, Portsmouth, New Hampshire this week with our new team, with some of our new team members, and you have hundreds of people in our company who are just here because they want to make a difference. And it's not always easy, but it is this incredibly joyful but hard mission of saying, how do we help cancer patients and how do we do it faster?
Yeah, I don't think the public always looks at companies like that are like, again, putting patients first like that. So I really applaud your efforts. It's something that kind of drew me to Moshe many years ago when we first met. I could just feel I could feel the passion and really wanting to do something really great, actually, which is I think something you guys are all about. Talking about advancements, could you talk a little bit, both of you, question for both of you, talk about Optune Gio, if I said that correctly, I hope I did, and what's that all about?
So Optune Gio is the brand name for the device that's used to treat glioblastoma. And as I mentioned before, we completed a phase 3 study, first in the treatment of second-line treatment of glioblastoma, and then in first-line glioblastoma more recently. And that trial showed that we were able to extend the median overall survival for all patients, and it also showed our ability, to do so, as I mentioned, in the context of having skin irritation as the main adverse event. More recently, what we've done with Optune Gio and really for Tumor Treating Fields in glioblastoma is that we've looked at other ways to use the therapy, going beyond what was the existing standard of care of chemotherapy. So one thing we've done is we've just completed an almost 1,000 patient randomized controlled trial looking at using Tumor Treating Fields at the same time as radiation for the glioblastoma patients. So we're moving the treatment even earlier in the treatment paradigm to see if we can really knock the tumors down as fast as possible. And then going forward, now that trial is completed, we're actually in the process of opening another trial for glioblastoma patients where Tumor Treating Fields will be used at the same time as an immune checkpoint inhibitor to see, as Moshe said, we believe there may be downstream, and Moshe, I'll turn it over to you to really talk about this, but we believe there's some scientific rationale for that.
Quick question before we go over to Moshe, but is it challenging to enroll people in clinical trials? Because I know from our other pharmaceutical partners that are, that are supportive of AACR, and we just know it's challenging to get people, also to get people of all different types of disparities and people that really kind of support a broad range of demographic, if you will.
It is absolutely challenging to get patients into clinical trials. COVID certainly did not help. And I think a lot of the clinics, we went through over the last 4 years, this cycle that COVID really slowed clinical trial enrollment, which then brought down the support staff at the institutions who are needed to run the trials. And it's been a slow process of getting them back. Mm-hmm. So I think particularly in the United States, we've had challenges with clinical trials. And Mitch, thank you for mentioning the need to increase diversity in clinical trials. That's a key area of focus for us. I think, we've tried our best to sponsor different activities, including fellowships for researchers who would be able to include a more diverse population into clinical trials. We know the FDA is focused on this issue. Increasingly, Medicare is focused on this issue, and we are constantly looking for ways that we can help, including even simple things like making sure we're providing transportation credits to patients in the trial so that we can draw from a broader population.
Mm-hmm. And Moshe, do you talk about partnerships, external partnerships, and some of the preclinical research you're all about? I know you guys are very visible at AACR annual meeting, and it's really important to start developing, as you talked about, Frank, relationships with academic centers and other scientists. But can you talk a little bit about your partnerships and what are some of your goals around that?
Yeah, so definitely, and we do have an outstanding partnership with AACR, which we cherish, and actually many of the investigators, which I mentioned earlier, became aware of TTFields via the AACR Foundation. Association, and actually many of them were supported via the Novocure AACR grant mechanism.
Yes, thank you all both so much for that support. Really appreciate that.
And now these investigators started looking into TTFields, and even though the focus of expertise may have been different, now they are adding TTFields and to what they do on their routine lab work, and they have major discoveries related to TTFields in their field of expertise. So we are learning so much through these external collaborators. And again, thank you for the AACR for bringing these people on board. And as I mentioned earlier, more and more research nowadays is being done by external collaborators. So bringing their expertise in an independent fashion provides so much credibility to the acceptance of TTFields, and the fact that the data is being reproducible. In science, how important reproducibility is. So I think all in all, this is a major transition that we are experiencing these days from the shift of I think the research from inside the company to the external world, and contributing a lot again to the acceptance.
So that exposure is really important, I think. Getting the word out about the company, making more scientists, making more patients aware of this.
Yes, absolutely. And I think AACR deserves particular credit in how you're ambitious about the research that you fund. And it's not that I think one, you look for younger investigators often who are really on the cutting edge of a brand new area of science. And two is you do provide meaningful grants, because you don't, science can't happen sort of on a 1 year budget, no budget. Right. And I think AACR has the right mindset of looking for investigators who are young and ambitious, looking for projects that will really move the needle, and then ensuring that the funding matches the needs of the project. So I really hats off to AACR for its approach.
Well, thanks. We're very concerned about the cancer workforce and the future of the cancer workforce, and getting grant opportunities through the Novocure program is like a lot of bright young scientists are thriving because of that. And bottom line is they're probably making a big impact out there for us as well. So really appreciate that. You've talked a lot about success stories and about how some of the milestones that you've all have hit as a company. Can you think of any specific examples of patients that have really benefited because of the TTFields?
Absolutely.
I'm sure there's plenty, but I just was wondering if there's any that come to mind.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a patient who has. I'll mention him, because he's a good friend now, and I know he won't mind being mentioned because he has been very public about his story. But there was a patient named Mike Hugo who's based in Florida, and he is a medical device executive himself, and very early on brought Optune into his treatment paradigm for glioblastoma. And I think if you look at his, if you Google his story, it's really just incredible that he was able to reach out to Tim McGraw, whose father died of glioblastoma, yes, and ultimately had Tim McGraw come in and sing a duet with him for his daughters,
really,
who are quite young now, but he wanted to make sure he had recorded a duet for their wedding, and that was about 18 months ago, and he's now out. Well past the expected median overall survival for glioblastoma, still on Optune, and he's an amazing force for good in the world right now, telling his story. And
sounds like he'd be a great guest for Believe in Progress.
I think he'd be a fantastic guest.
Maybe we get Tim McGraw on to do a duet online. That would be really cool.
That would be amazing. Yeah. I don't know how. I haven't heard Mike actually sing, so I can't vouch for his singing, but I think Tim could probably cover.
That's really cool. I always like to talk a little bit about mentors and mentorship, because I'm a big believer in that, and just in general. And so this is a question I'd love for both of you to answer. So Moshe, have you had mentors in your career, and how have they affected your career professionally and personally? And then are you a mentor for folks as well?
Oh, I hope. I don't know. It's not for me to testify on that. But yes, definitely I had amazing mentors, and starting from my parents, who curiosity and nature were constantly present in our life. And going through my biology teacher, who had a PhD from I think it was the Weizmann Institute, and this was in high school, and then of course at the university life, I had amazing mentors, and and they came from very diversified fields. So, but in the past, I think I joined Novocure in 2005. This was the first time I became aware of Professor Palti, and Professor Palti, I think, is definitely uh, my my, my most prominent mentor. He is truly a man of the Renaissance, and he's constantly thinking outside of the box, and his field of expertise, physics, medicine, physiology, and the ability to integrate all these fields. Something, as a mentor, I don't think that I can follow that path. He is so bright, but still that set the kind of the North Star for all of us to excel all the time and to think in an innovative fashion and never take anything for granted. So, yes.
Yeah, I think as leaders, we all are mentors in one way or another. Frank, how about you? Have you had a few special mentors in your career?
I have, and I think what Moshe said about having a diverse group of mentors is really critical, because it's as we all know, life is hard. It throws a lot at you, and the more you have different tools in your toolbox to deal with it, the better off you are. And so I have several teachers from high school with whom I'm still in touch.
Okay.
One of whom has it probably in one way or another, I'm in touch with him almost every other week, and then along the way, and as I got older and into business, I've been incredibly fortunate in that when I was 21 and I started on Wall Street in venture capital and investing in companies, I actually went to work for a gentleman named Bill Doyle, who is still the executive chairman of Novocure.
Right.
And in 2004, when we had set up our own venture capital fund, we made the first VC investments into Novocure. So it was 20 years ago today, the first time I
today?
Well, almost.
Right. Okay.
A couple of weeks from now, but it was basically 20 years ago that I first saw the Novocure business plan and first got involved in the company. But I've had that continuity of having a mentor from the day that I entered the workforce, who's always looked out for my career, and I think that's also incredibly valuable too. Is just as you get into your career, whether it's in academia or in business, looking for that person who's maybe 2 levels ahead of you, whom you can trust and will have your back is a really big part of life.
Right. Right. Do you think it affects you personally as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, especially in a work environment, again, whether it's academic or otherwise, knowing that the department chair or the CEO knows who you are and has your back. Yep. It's the core to any good culture and any good organization.
So, last question for both of you. Let's look into the future. Let's look 3 to 5 years from now. Frank, what do you want Novocure to be looking like?
I think it's a continuation of what we're doing today, that we want to be a global company helping patients across multiple different tumor indications. And, as I mentioned today, we're primarily focused on GBM and mesothelioma, but we have completed our phase 3 trial for non-small cell lung cancer, and we are at FDA now to try to move ahead treating in that cancer type. I think, as I mentioned, pancreatic cancer results will be available later this year. But from there, it just goes on to looking where there's high unmet need, particularly at tumors that are hard to access for chemotherapies and biologics, and trying to think through where can we really move the needle and drive a massive survival difference. That's the question that we ask ourselves every day.
And are there significant challenges to get there?
I think there's I wouldn't say significant, but there is just the core challenge that cancer is a terrible disease.
Yes, it is.
And as humans, we've been going after it for 140 years or so, and we still haven't defeated it. So we're very respectful of our enemy in this endeavor. But I don't think it's insurmountable. I think that we have a technology that we know, as Moshe said, it works in the Petri dish, it works in all of our preclinical experiments. And now it's up to us to engineer a device that can deliver it to as broad of a patient set as possible.
And Moshe, you look into your future for the next 3 to 5 years. What are you looking at as the chief scientific officer of this incredible company?
Thank you. There are numerous initiatives that we are pursuing, again, both internally and externally. But I think it's not just about the science that we do, it's also about the education that we are providing to the rest of the world. And I think it's extremely important for the physicians, the patients, to be aware of this modality, because historically, the treatment of cancer had been limited mainly by systemic toxicities. Now, everyone knows that winning over cancer requires a multimodal approach, but it's so difficult to manage the toxicities. Now, TTField is an effective therapy by itself, and it does offer the potential, based on the mechanism of action, to actually work with other therapies, and with the fact that there are a few additional or very limited additional toxicities other than the skin irritation. I think there is a potential, and educating the world on the opportunities and bringing more people on board to study TTField, to practice TTField, I think this is where I really want us to go.
That's fantastic. That's why you need to be visibly present at the American Association for Cancer Research meetings all the time, which you have been. We're really, really appreciative of that. Well, we will certainly make our listeners and our audience aware of how they can learn more about Novocure in the footnotes of the Believe in Progress podcast. We'll do our best to keep getting the word out so more people and more investigators and more academic centers really understand how to learn more about this really, really interesting technology. But Frank and Moshe, been an honor and a pleasure to have you join us today. And any final last words you'd like to leave us with, Frank?
I would just say again, thank you. Really appreciate the work that AACR does. I remember being at the AACR conference in Washington, D.C. in 2017.
Yep.
It was my first time there, and I was blown away by the volume and the quality of the research that was being presented. I got to know AACR more over the years and have just have a true respect for the way that you translate over your contributions into meaningful research and meaningful sponsorships of the people who want to make a difference.
Well, great. Well, thank you both for being here today, and look forward to our continued collaborations and partnerships, and all the best to you both and your families as well. Thank you so much. A special thank you to Frank Leonard and Dr. Moshe Giladi for sharing your insights and the groundbreaking work being done at Novocure. Your dedication to advancing cancer treatment through innovative therapies like Tumor Treating Fields is truly inspiring. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of Believe in Progress podcast. If you want to learn more about Novocure and the revolutionary TTFields therapy, please visit novocure.com. You can also find a link to their website in this episode's show notes. Remember, your support and interest help drive the progress against cancer. Your support is crucial in the fight against cancer. Please consider making a donation to the American Association for Cancer Research at aacr.org. Every contribution helps advancing life-saving cancer research. And until next time, keep believing in progress and the power of innovation in the fight against cancer. This podcast is produced by CollegeCast LLC. And don't forget, cancer research saves lives.